Have our children gone mad? You will have to go back nearly a decade to find anything resembling what has been happening across the country in the last 1 week. Back then, civil society deeply offended by trillions of naira stolen by government officials and campaign donors to the ruling party in the name of petrol subsidy mounted protests that rocked the country and nearly brought President Jonathan Goodluck government to its knees. As it turned out, nearly didn't kill that bird. It, however, triggered Bring Back Our Girls, which sent waves of protest as far away as the United States White House against the cavalier way that Jonathan's government handled the kidnap of over 200 schoolgirls from their dormitory in daylight in Chibok. Yet, even the protests at that time are only a shadow of what has happened or have been happening in the country since last week. EndSARS is what happens when deep-seated injustice and oppression meet single-minded courage and determination. It's hard to tell which of the stories that sparked the protest is more heartbreaking. The story of the woman whose brother was killed by the Special Anti-Robbery Squad SARS and whose grief was compounded by SARS men demanding sex before the young man's corpse would be released. The corpse was released after a radio announcer intervened, but the victim's mother died while waiting. What about the case of young Habori Shadi, who was forced to get off an interstate bus because he was carrying an iPhone, and after the SARS men didn't find enough money in his account, framed him as armed robber or robbery suspect? Or the case of Ifoma Abugu, a young lady that had just completed a national youth service who was arrested in place of her fiancé, sexually molested in detention and left to die in the cell. Or Tiamiyu Kazim, who was stopped by SARS men and as they tried to take him into custody, fell out of the SARS van and was run over by a moving car. Have we forgotten the cases of dozens of young men humiliated, detained, and brutalized for their dreadlocks, tattoos, long beards, and vanguard dressing? Or the filmmaker who escaped death by the skin of his teeth for carrying props meant for an action movie? Even if you overlook the trauma of the survivors, which is quite a mountain to climb, the 82 persons who, according to an Amnesty International report, were killed extrajudicially by SARS in the last 3 years, present unique stories of ruthlessly aborted dreams. While each affected family has borne its own grief in its own unique way, not a single perpetrator has been brought to book. Ochuko, the young man whose shooting in Ughelli, Delta State last week sparked the latest protest, barely escaped with his life. It doesn't matter whether it was SARS or Operation Delta Safe that pulled the trigger, they are cousins of the same deadly heritage. And that's precisely the point. How long that heritage would be endured, tolerated, and even enabled. As the protest spread, former Inspector General of Police Suleiman Haba shed a few tears, not for the victims of the heinous crime and brutality, but for SARS. He said, "We are going to miss SARS so badly that we would regret the day they were redistributed." By the time he was done messaging, I couldn't help a sense of relief that he failed to get the All Progressive Congress nomination to run for Senate in Jigawa State. That's how he would have been talking in the Senate. Abba doesn't get it. He won't. In his 30-year career in the politics force, apart from his tour of duty as aide-de-camp to General Sani Abacha's wife, his withdrawal of the police orderly attached to former Speaker of the House of Representatives Aminu Tambuwal, and the day Dr. Reuben Abati announced his appointment as IGP. In a short press statement, you will have to scratch your head to remember that he rose that high in the force. He apparently just love to leave rotten dead bodies in the forest exactly where they were buried, with a big face mask over his nose. Abba is not the only one who thinks that we might yet send roses to SARS for dismantling them. I've heard some say that while SARS operating in most parts of the north are good guys, the ones in Lagos and a number of the states in the south, and especially the southerners among them, are the bad guys. Why dismantle the good guys with the bad? Why? When there's an epidemic of rape, the way to save potential victims is not to try to find which likely perpetrators are wearing trial marks or to use a measuring tape down below. There is no question that there are good policemen, and I have met a few of them in my lifetime. The question is whether the culture of brutality is the force, and indeed in the security services is not too deeply entrenched to make any cosmetic changes useless and endanger even the few good ones. Even in the midst of the protest, policemen were still slashing the car tires of social crusader Aisha Yesufu and those of other protesters. They were tear-gassing them and hosing them with water cannons when the fire service couldn't find enough water to quench the fire, said to the office of the Accountant General of the Federal. You're listening to Independent TV 7. Please click the subscribe button